am going to turn us over.
Okay, so we'll start out. It's interesting, a couple of things. I have people who watch these on YouTube, or obviously the lovely people who join us live. And it's interesting to me. I'll get people reaching out, uh, often asking me, um, if I can work with them, and I'm always like happy to talk to people and answer any questions and see what I can do to help them find somebody to help them. Um, and one thing that kind of cracks me up as a side note is, I have a very, very small feeling of what it must be like to be a celebrity, because people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm actually talking to you. And I'm like, guys, I have like 500 views on each of these videos, but I think there are some people who regularly watch, and they think it's cool that I'm actually responding. And I honestly try to respond to everybody. Most people I'll even do a phone call with, if we can make scheduling work or whatever. And so I love it. You guys want to reach out to me, go ahead. I encourage it. I think it's kind of fun to have a conversation with, and have you guys see that I'm just a real person, just like you. Same with Scott, awesome human, but we're just real regular people. Um, but I love the feedback, because I've had several people lately feel like I have a very different approach, which I don't feel like I have a different approach. But one of the things that I'm hearing is it's really resonating with people when I talk about the need for equality in a relationship, between spouses, and how, for instance, it feels like a struggle, and it is a struggle, by the way, when there is somebody who's active in addiction or in recovery from addiction, that sort of thing. They often move to that less than position. They move to that less than role. Now, whether that's most of the time, I think that's unintentional. I think what I see is that partners, who are not struggling with addiction, have spent so many years trying to like ask their partner, step up, be an equal, like, and you think about it, basic things create equality in a relationship. Honesty creates equality in a relationship. Being transparent about what's going on. And one of the things that I'll say that will decrease equality in a relationship is appeasement. If we are ever trying to appease our spouse, we're trying to make them happy so that we're happy, is never equality. We lose a sense of self. A lot of times it's because we don't have a sense of self. So we appease our partner. We tell them things we think they want to hear. And um, and that appeasement leaves our partner feeling like, oh, this is what they really want. And then years later, they find out, oh, you were only saying that to make me happy. And it's so interesting how often the partner who is appeasing is shocked to find out, wait, you really would rather I hurt you with the truth? Like, they're blown away. You really would rather that I hurt you by telling you the truth? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And my thought is, it's because real accountability is not a concept that you've been able to learn and understand, right? Accountability creates equality in a relationship. So honesty, accountability. Here's something else. In order to have equality in the relationship, we both have to realize that equality applies to needs. They apply to needs and wants and desires in a relationship. And so too often you'll have somebody who's struggling with addiction who's almost like, well, I'm not allowed to have needs and wants because I'm the bad guy in this relationship. And it's actually like, no, in fact, you are so underdeveloped in your needs and wants, the insights of your needs and wants, that you don't even know what they are. And in fact, so much of your addiction recovery work needs to be about discovering what those needs and wants are and how to ask for them and how to find healthy ways to get them met. And so if you go into a less than position and think that you aren't allowed to have needs and wants because you're the problem, you are creating a much bigger issue in the relationship, a lack of inequality. And so it's interesting, like the word that I don't love, I've talked about it on here before, is the word boundaries. I don't love it because of what all the misconceptions of what they are and how they apply, but I love the concept. It's really all about needs. But if you look at it, the person struggling with an addiction has more boundary issues and more need to work on their boundaries and more need at vocalizing their boundaries, usually, than the betrayed partner has. And so you take this position in recovery work of, I'm not allowed to have boundaries because I'm the addict. And it's like, no, more importantly, you must figure out your boundaries. You must vocalize them to your spouse. In fact, a healthy relationship is us exploring our boundaries together so that we both get our needs met. So we really are pushing for equality in the relationship. Do not take that step down position or that step up position. If you are a betrayed partner, for instance, trying to take control because you're hurt and scared, which you have every right to be, that is a position of inequality. Nobody wants to be, no healthy person wants to be married to their child or feel like they're married to a child, right? And so it's scary and it's difficult to take that role of being the adult in the relationship, especially if you feel like you're the only one who's been able to realistically allow us to survive, right? A betrayed partner, I can think of one I've been working with recently who's like, if I don't take the adult role, we'll lose our house, right? And it's like, no, I get the fear there, and I'm not suggesting lose your house, but I am suggesting you do what you need to do to take care of your needs, but we have conversations about, hey, long term, I don't want to be in a relationship where I'm in this role of having to take care of this. I want an equal partner where we're doing all of this together. So I'm not suggesting this is easy. I'm suggesting that while we do recovery, we're putting everything through the lens of what does healthy equality look like in the relationship. And we're asking our partner, when I do this, does that feel like I'm putting you in a less than role? Or does that feel like I'm putting you in the opposite of less than, a power role, a power position role? We're checking it in because I want to be aware. When do I do a step down role? When do I put you in an above role? Because I don't want that dynamic. If this is happening without me knowing or without you knowing, that's not helping us recover. So that's what I'm suggesting. We have these conversations regularly. I would even say weekly. Let's talk about it. Do you feel less than? If so, what does it look like? Do you feel like you have to be the adult? If so, how often? Why? When's this coming up? And I'm telling you, you're checking that in all the time. Otherwise, you're slipping into these roles without even realizing it, out of fear, scarcity. And we can obviously, for the rest of this webinar, we can talk more about these concepts or go anywhere else you'd like. But Scott, what are your thoughts as I walk through this? You've heard me talk about this plenty, I'm sure.
Yeah, a couple. Sorry, I'm scribbling.
Oh no, keep scribbling. You're good.
um,
Get those
so
thoughts down.
So my first thought is, what about relationships where people really truly don't want equality?
Well,
And they do
that's,
exist. I
oh yeah,
watched my
no.
parents for
Well,
59 years.
here's the difficulty I have in that. What if equality in your relationship is that you both are happy with the roles you're in? Right? Like that's going to sound wonky, but I want you to think about this. I've met plenty of people where both are content and happy with their roles. And I think, okay, so keep in mind, equality has something to do with self-judgment, right? Which is why it's so important we talk about it weekly. Because I might think, hey, I feel like an equal in the relationship. And my partner might say, I feel like the adult. And I'm like, really? Like, help me understand your judgment and your perspective. Because I don't want you to be in that, to feel in that role and in that position. But if you have two people that are in roles that they both like, and I'm trying to think of, I'll give you one example. If you have a couple where one of them's like, honestly, I'm fine if you handle all the finances, and the other one's like, cool, I enjoy it, happy to do it. There's nothing wrong with it if it works for your relationship. Most likely, there's some type of division of labor there anyway, where you handle finances, I'll handle whatever, right? Whatever other role it might be. So you can sit and judge other couples all day long, but if it works for them and they're content, then they're within their relational agreement. It sounds equal to me.
Yeah, I mean, I just, but you also said appeasement, um, you know, destroys equality.
Right, but let's talk about what appeasement is, right?
Okay.
If two couples are in a relationship and I'm judging, so as a clinician, I will question couples all the time. Like, so they're in charge of all the finances. Does that bother you at all? And they're like, oh no, not at all. Well, does it bother you that you're in charge of all the finances? No, I think it works great. Then I'm like, cool. Like, I'll challenge it and check it in just to see if there's anything there. And if they're content with it, then I'm like, okay, then what are we working on? Right. Like, but appeasement would be, um, hey, how do you feel about your partner being in charge of the finances? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine with it. Okay, so there's never any resentment about funds being spent. And they're like, well, sometimes, and this, I'll jokingly use an example that doesn't apply to me, but like sometimes I want to buy a new bike, but I'm afraid that I honestly know I can't ask for it. I'll get rejected. And I'm like, well, how does that make you feel? Well, a little resentful. Okay, but do you tell your spouse that? No. Okay, now we've got some appeasement going on. I'm saying that everything's fine, but I don't actually feel that way, but I don't want to create conflict. Well, then we don't have equality in the relationship. We're not being honest.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was asking about. I mean, it really is, what if the people in the relationship are either incapable or unwilling to be honest? They'd rather take the easier, softer way.
Right. That's not equality. Now think about
Yeah.
that for a second. In two ways. The person who's not willing or even capable of being honest, they hold power, like an unhealthy amount of power over their partner by withholding their secrets, their self, right? So they hold the power here and the partner's in a lesser role because they're in the dark, right? Now, this partner may hold power because, well, I'm in charge of the finances and you aren't getting what you want, right? And so you have a power imbalance really both directions. It's just one's holding secrets and the other's in charge of the finances, and we don't talk about and express what's really going on underneath, right? Most of us, when we're in power roles over somebody else, it's not even intentional. It's just occurring naturally. What we want to do as a couple is try to have the conversations to figure out, like, hey, when I do these things, do you feel less than in any way?
Yeah. So it's the conversation that I see as missing. I mean, I'm still stuck on my parents' relationship, but they never talked about any of it.
Well, so
Um, and then they
was
both
there?
walked around filled with resentment for
So
59
there
years.
you go. There's your answer, that there's an improper power of balance because of the underlying resentment. Right.
Yeah.
If you said, oh man, they were really happy and they figured out how to work through things and there wasn't resentment, then I'd be like, okay, well then what do you care that it looked imbalanced?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I get that. So, okay. Thank you for clarifying. Um, my other thought was, you mentioned sometimes one person has the adult role and the other one doesn't, and this occurs a lot with addiction, mental illness, and things like that. We talk about this in Prodependence a lot. Rob talks about it in the book. You've talked about it. Sometimes, if somebody's not capable of taking care of themselves or not, you know, we need to step up and become the adults. Where it comes off the rails is when we start doing for others things they could and should be doing for themselves. And this is
Absolutely.
sort of the balance.
Uh-huh.
I mean, prodependence is I fill in your weak spots, you fill in mine, we're stronger because of it.
Right.
But
Right.
ideally, the addict will get well, and the dynamic should change.
That's the hope. What we have to figure out as couples is, let's say we arrive to a point where we realize, this is as far as my partner can go. So then do I accept and can I do that without having underlying resentment, and therefore be okay with where we're at in the relationship? At that point, essentially, you're accepting this as an equal relationship. Now, I've had people that are like, no, I harbor resentment. Okay, well, then just understand that there's an imbalance of power here, and that it's not enough to cause a permanent fracture in the relationship where you're willing to get a divorce or whatever, but you've grown to accept that it's this way and it's never going to be any different. Now, I think sometimes we get to that space too quickly without exploring a lot of options. Or we hang on to resentment too long, right? Like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think people settle into the role of, I'm going to be the caretaker and you're going to be the caretakee. And that's how it's going to be forever. Even if you get sober and clean up your act, I'm still going to run the show. I'm still going to micromanage your life. I'm still going to pay for everything. I see this with parents and children a lot. The parents are, the kid's 45 and the parents are still paying the rent. It's like, your kid has a job, you know? Yeah, but he'd have to live in an apartment instead of a nice, I'm like, okay, fine.
Well, and that's where, so this is where it's tough,
It
because
is.
is it working for them?
Right.
What you're doing is sitting in judgment
I
saying,
am.
I don't think that's healthy. Okay. You might be right. You might also be wrong,
Yeah.
because if they're fine with it,
Yeah.
right now, if the kid starts building resentment and I don't understand why my life isn't going well for me, right, as a clinician, I'm going to be challenging them, saying, well, I don't know, let's take a look at this. Why
Or they take advantage of it.
Yeah, like, why don't you, like, if I mean, I'm using your hypothetical, but if I was working with the kid who's still living with his parents, the adult who's still living with their parents, and they're complaining to me like, I don't understand why I can't find a steady date, a steady person to date, and I'm saying, well, I'm just curious, how much do you think potential partners like the fact that you live at home with your parents? Right. And so I'm going to go after a potential discrepancy that's going on within them, or at least show them the possibility.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. And you're right. I'm sort of hoisting my own values onto the equation and realizing, your relationship is not mine. You have different values, you have different needs, as you mentioned.
But if
And
they came to you and said, Scott, we're struggling with our kids staying here, right? And what they're telling you is that they're dealing with some unresolved resentment or whatever else. And you might say, well, I've got a few judgments that you guys could try on. Well, at that point, they're asking you for your opinion. And you say, if it's me, it looks unhealthy. And here's why. Right. But at the same time, I'm fine if you guys want to keep doing that. It's your lives.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for humoring me there. Actually, that was helpful for me. I hope it was helpful for other people. We've got some questions here. We're going to jump into the Q&A. It's a very small group of participants today, so type in as many questions as you. This is a great time to ask questions because we're going to have plenty of time for you. My husband is currently struggling to admit he is dealing with addiction. We've been married 21 years. I discovered infidelity 3 years ago, although he claims not to have any physical affairs in 10 years. How do I help him see that even strip clubs and porn and trying to hook up is a problem?
Such a good question. I'm going to suggest to you that if he's not ready to admit he has an addiction, then don't tell him he has an addiction. In fact, I would say maybe you don't, but what does it matter whether you have an addiction or not? Is this working for you? Because I'm not sure it's working for me, or I know for sure it isn't working for me. So I don't care what we call it. I love how you said it is a problem. That's what I'm focusing on. Who cares if he ever believes he has an addiction or not? I think I love what you said at the end, which is if he can't recognize it's a problem, then you have a problem. Meaning, what are you going to do with that? Like, if he never recognizes it as a problem, can you stay in that relationship? Now, I would say that he's recognized some problem. If he hasn't had any physical affairs in 10 years, that would tell me he's like recognized, well, that's not an option. That's not within my spouse's marital agreement, if that makes sense. But I think you probably need to start having conversations about what you see as a problem and why, asking him lots of questions. What does he see as a problem and why? It's going to sound goofy, but I'd even ask the question, do you think that a healthy relationship has this in there? And if he's like, well, no, okay, well, tell me more about that then. If a healthy relationship doesn't have this as a part of the relationship, then you're telling me you see this as a problem, right? I think sometimes we focus too much on, I need him to know that this is an addiction. Whatever he calls it, whatever anybody calls it, it doesn't matter. Call it an addiction, don't call it an addiction. He might have too much shame around the word addiction. So let's just focus on what you are identifying here as the problem. And that is, here's the pain that comes up for me when you do these behaviors. Do you see that as a problem? Do you think that I'm the one that needs to let go and not be hurt by these behaviors? Right. And usually when you're having a discussion like this, and it's a little bit more of a rational discussion, and we can talk and think and ask questions about things, logic tends to prevail. And I'm not saying that's always the case, because I've worked with plenty of illogical people. But that's probably where I'm going to go first. Is just to start to have, well, if you don't think it's an addiction, that's fine. Let's list together what things you do see as a problem. Let me list the things I see as a problem. Let's see if we can agree on some of those things. If you don't agree with some of the things I see as a problem, why not? Why is it that you think that way, that these things aren't a problem? And then ultimately, you have to decide, how long can I wait for him to figure this out? I mean, you don't really have to decide that. I don't think anybody's like, I'm going to give it 17 months, right? But you have to ultimately decide how long can I stay in this if he never recognizes all these issues? Really, so really good question. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, one of the things, that I hear from addicts that I deal with all the time is, I'm not having a real affair. Why is she so upset? And it's like, okay, well, you've been chatting with this woman online for 6 months and sharing intimate just because she lives in Russia and you live here doesn't mean you're not having an affair. And there's research, Dr. Rubb and a couple other therapists, this was 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago now, when the internet was really taking off. They wanted to do some research and they wanted to find out, does it have to be in person? Or they wanted to know about what causes the most pain. And what they found was online and real world behaviors cause the same amount of pain to the betrayed partner. Moreover, with real world behaviors, touch and not touch still causes the same amount of pain. So looking at porn causes basically the same amount of pain as an affair. Now you can escalate, if I'm having an affair with your sister, that might cause a little bit more pain. But betrayed partners, really, it's the loss of relationship trust that hurts the most over the long term. And one of the things Dr. Rob took away from that was infidelity isn't about any specific sexual act. It's about the lies and the secrets and the covering up. If I'm keeping important secrets, important sexual and romantic secrets from you, I'm cheating. If I'm lying about my sexual and romantic behavior, I'm cheating. As Matt said, are strip clubs okay in your relationship? Is porn okay in your relationship? Is being on a hookup app but not actually hooking up, is that okay? There are some relationships I know of where all of those things are okay.
Right. We actually
but they've been discussed.
Right. We call those relational agreements, and you cannot have a relational agreement without a conversation and an agreement, right? And so I'm totally with you. The one piece I'll back you up on, Scott, meaning let's rewind, is you said the way you said that. Well, how about this? I don't know that I would try to argue whether a real affair or not. I think I would say, okay, so if I'm hearing you, your behavior would only be problematic if there was physical contact. Is that what you're saying? And if they're like, absolutely. Okay, so you don't see why chatting with somebody online and having essentially everything but a physical relationship then somehow makes your behavior okay. And if they're like, yes, interesting. Now my next question, how did you come to that position? Right. That essentially, is that because that's all you've done? Or what would it take for you to justify a physical affair? Right. Because it sounds like now that you're just trying to create logic to support your current unhealthy behavior. Or have you felt your whole life that anybody having an emotional affair or some type of intimacy, as long as it's not physical, is okay? Right? I'm going to get in and try and figure out, why do you think this way? Rather than trying to convince them, you should see it my way. You're not going to convince.
You're absolutely right. Right. And one of the things,
I don't mean to be rude, but the thing that comes the quote, I don't remember who said it, but the quote that comes to mind is never argue with an idiot. They're way better at it than you are, and they're going to beat you with it. It's that idea. Don't argue with them. Try and figure out how in the world they develop their thought process.
Yeah. And, one of the things, it's like, well, how does your wife feel about this? Well, she's really upset about it. Gee, why? Why do you think she's upset? Again, just picking at them, why do you think this is okay and she doesn't? But what all this really boils down to is what you were talking about earlier, is we have to have conversations about what our relationship is and what's okay and what's not okay, and who's doing what,
and the hardest thing about having tough conversations is staying out of reactivity. Right? The moment I'm trying to get into a conversation with an agenda, the moment I need to convince you of something, right? Is the moment I lose the connection in the relationship, because now I'm trying to convince you have to see it my way, or I need to change your opinion, or I need you, right? That if I become reactive in a conversation, we're not connecting anymore, because I'm too focused on an objective that I've created. Now, this is the hardest thing to learn to do with a spouse, someone you love, especially someone you love who's hurt you, right? Because you're in so much pain, you're trying to figure out desperately how to fix it. And so don't for any second think that I'm telling you this is easy. Learning how to do this with your intimate partner is literally, in my opinion, the hardest relational skill you will ever learn, is having a conversation, staying out of reactivity while you get curious with your partner. I preach it all the time, but you guys got to know it is hard.
Yeah, easier said than done. But worth it. My sex addict, porn addict partner says that even when he does exactly what he says he's going to do, which isn't super often, I can't be pleased. Can you please address that even if he, for example, only goes where he says he'll be and then comes home on time, if he's still acting out multiple times a week, not being transparent with who he's interacting with, not making safe choices, or often putting others first, we're never going to get to a good place. So it sounds like he's still acting out, but then when he doesn't act out, he wants a pat on the back. I mean, that's how I'm reading it, but you may read that differently, Matt.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So this is probably a good example where I would say that accidentally, I think we talked about, I think it was, yeah, he is likely going to a place of like less than behavior. Like, in order to feel confident about the recovery work I'm doing, I need you to continually be reminding me and validating me, giving me a pat on the back that I am good enough. And in this example, like, I would be, as a clinician, I would be challenging him. What would it be like for you to feel confident about the recovery work you're doing, regardless of how your spouse feels about it? Like, why is your recovery work about you being good enough for, I'm assuming, a her here, being good enough for her? And what would make me nervous is, so would you introduce like any justifications in your mind if you've worked really hard, now you didn't get the validation you needed? Does that give you justification to act out or do any other unhealthy behavior, right? And so I think in this situation, I hear your hopelessness. We're never going to get to a good place. And what I hear you saying is, why am I always the adult? Like, why can't he just feel good about the good things he's done and recognize healthy guilt about the things that still aren't going okay? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I can see where that's super frustrating. Him acting out multiple times a week. It's almost like I'm acting out multiple times a week, and I'm not being transparent about who I'm interacting with, and I'm not making safe choices, but you need to tell me all the good things I'm doing. And it's like, okay, can you own that that's a little incongruent on what an equal relationship would look like? Right? If that's the case, I can talk about the good things you're doing, and while I'm after we're done talking about the good things that you're doing, you're also going to say, well, cool, I'm glad you're seeing the good I'm doing, but let's be honest about the bad I'm doing as well. Right? Because that's what a healthy equal relationship would look like. Hey, I appreciate you validating the good things I'm doing, but let's also talk about some of the things I'm still doing that are hurting you. That's what an equal relationship would then look like. You're not getting that. And so your hopelessness about feeling like you're never getting into a good place is valid. And if he's listening, I would encourage him, that's fine. Let's talk about the good things you're doing. Let's also talk about the things that still aren't working, right? Again, equality is, we can look at both. And regardless of the good things you're doing, that doesn't make you a good person. Regardless of the bad things you're doing, that doesn't make you a bad person. You're just a person doing good and bad things like the rest of us. And if we're going to have a healthier relationship, we need to talk about both.
Yeah.
I think
yeah, go ahead.
you could do that for yourself. Well, we can talk about the good things I'm doing. We can talk about the bad things that I'm doing. One of the bad things that I'm doing is going into a hopeless place when I feel like we're never going to be equal in this relationship and it's driving me crazy, right? Now, at the same time, I'll totally validate it, but it's a bad place, right? So, anyway, Scott, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to reiterate, in terms of being transparent, one of the things you said earlier is um, the partners, betrayed partners, would usually rather know the truth, even if it hurts. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
almost always, they would rather know the truth, even if it hurts. Um, and not being told the truth is hurtful. I mean, it is one of the things that destroys relationship trust. I mean, I don't think any of us expects our partner to be perfect. I mean, maybe some of us do, but we married a real person. They're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. We're going to love them anyway, as long as they're not, and even if they're hiding it, but easier to love them if I actually know and maybe can help, or at least, say, wow, thanks for telling me. I don't know if you have thoughts about that, but
I don't know that anything necessarily pops up in my mind. Were you asking a question?
no, no, I just wanted to reiterate, like, the truth, having a conversation that's truthful
Oh,
is
yeah.
a lot more productive than hiding.
Even a conversation about how I'm like, I know I need a different answer here. I just don't even know what it would be. Like, right. Or I know I need to share with you what's going on, and I'm terrified. Right. So even having an honest conversation about my struggle to be honest is so refreshing.
Okay, next one here. My sex addict, porn addict partner states that he doesn't understand how he's re-traumatizing me. He said, excuse me. He says he's not doing anything to me. I feel that he is emotionally not present, that he projects, he lies, he gaslights, he minimizes, he places others first. He's not even sober after nearly 5 years since the original D-Day, despite repeatedly promising to work really hard at it. Can you explain re-traumatization and safety and what is realistic to expect? That's a big
Well,
question.
no, it's a huge question, and I'll do my best. But I'm actually going to start with what came earlier. You said he doesn't understand how he's re-traumatizing me. What if I told you you're right? He doesn't, and that's because somewhere in his history he created this idea, and most likely his sex and porn issues were probably before you ever came along. And so in his mind, I've been struggling with this forever. I don't understand why this hurts you. This isn't even about you. So he may have enough understanding to realize it's not about you, but not understand why that may still impact you. Right. And that's a lack of empathy, a lack of perspective taking on his part, right? Like he needs to probably do some serious work around perspective taking, to see, even if, hey, I know my intentions aren't to hurt you, I can see why you are hurt. And a lot of people will get so stuck on their intention. I'm not trying to hurt you, so therefore this shouldn't hurt you. And it's like, cool. Are you so, oh gosh, my judgment's coming out here. Are you so egocentric, narrow-minded that regardless of my intention, you can't see how this might impact you, right? Like impact me? And the truth is it's probably yes. Like he doesn't have the capability just yet. And please understand, I'm not giving him a pass, right? He part of his recovery is being able to see outside of himself. That's actually part of growing up and becoming a healthy adult, is seeing outside of ourselves to recognize I impact people, right? Like I remember, I think it's common, but I remember being a little kid and very clearly having the thought, what if I'm the only real person and everybody else is a robot? Right. And that's actually really normal for a kid to have. Like the world revolves around me. And a lot of times, if we get into unhealthy, out of control behavior in a stage of development early on, we stay stuck in that stage of development, that egocentric viewpoint of how in the world could I possibly be hurting somebody else if I'm not intending to. And so if you haven't noticed, what I've actually done is said, hey, even though this is super painful, let's actually have empathy for him for a moment. And the funny part is I bet you have tons of empathy for him, but you're like, can somebody please help me help him get out of this emotional stage of development that is stuck? And so that's your question, right? It's almost like, teach me how to teach him. And I see a lot of people try to do this when they'll say, well, how would you feel if I went and had an affair on you? Or how would you feel if I did these things, if I looked at porn? And the funny part is they don't get the response they're wanting. Most of the time it's like, well, I don't know, maybe we could do it together. It's like, no, that's not what's happening, right? So I hear some struggles here. He is not even sober after nearly 5 years since original D-Day, despite repeatedly promising to work really hard. Again, I'm going to ask him the question, hey, my judgment is you're not working very hard. Here's how I measure it: sobriety, and your ability to empathize with me. And so I'm gonna ask him the question. Talk to me. Do you feel like you're working really hard? Do you feel like you're doing enough in your recovery? Like, this is as far as we need to go? But the re-traumatization part is really about teaching somebody empathy, right? You said, can you explain re-traumatization? Like, a healthy partner who begins to understand empathy says, I can see that even though I'm not acting out as much, I can see why every time I act out, it brings you back to the feeling of when I was acting out as much as I was before. Or even though I'm not running around the house with torches of fire, that when I occasionally bring out, a big candle that's on fire, that feels like a torch to you, right? Like, and it brings up all my previous experience of running around with fire. And that re-traumatization is realizing that the body remembers everything. And unless safety is established, or even the understanding, hey, I'm going to light a candle, and I know that when I light candles, it scares you. So let's talk about that, right? I'd like to light a candle, but I don't want you to be afraid of fire. Right now, we're having a conversation saying, I see your trauma. I know that it's real for you, even if I don't understand it. And you matter to me so much that I don't want to have you hurt, right? These are the things that create safety. What's realistic to expect? I think it's realistic to expect that your needs will get met in a relationship. And if they aren't, you guys talk about it and you find healthy ways to get it met elsewhere. But what's tough is I don't know that it's realistic. No, that's not true. I don't know sometimes if it's possible early on in recovery. And I hear you saying 5 years? We're not early on. But what if he is? What if he's still stuck in early stages of recovery, right? So I mean early on in recovery, I just mean like judging by what's potentially slow growth, if that makes any sense. And so I feel it feels painful because I almost feel like I'm telling you I don't have the answer of what he can do necessarily. But what's realistic to expect? I mean, it'd be hard for me to be in a relationship for too long without growth, without empathy and compassion. right? I think it's difficult for any of us. Some people are better at it than others. Some people I consider can be quite saintly. Oh my gosh, you put up with it quite well. But I think it's realistic to expect pain, but we all have to figure out for how long. I almost feel like I didn't answer that question.
I think you kind of did. I mean, there isn't a real answer. I mean, addiction is about avoiding our feelings. Um, Addicts, we'll go 25, 30 years, and every time we have a feeling, we drink it or eat it or sex it. And we forget how to have feelings. And if I can't identify my own feelings, how am I supposed to know what Matt is feeling? You
Yeah.
know, and you've got a guy here who's not sober. He's still acting, he's still escaping his feelings. It's, in my experience, active addiction makes empathy difficult at best.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
well, and it's hard because let's say he is slipping up, but he's being honest about it,
right.
right? That to me is active recovery.
Yes.
And so it's tough because if there isn't active recovery, then you have active suppression of feelings. I mean, right? And being caught isn't being honest.
Yeah.
It's
And
tough.
yeah. Okay. Last one here. When repeated dishonesty and deception has occurred in a string of 3 years, including dishonesty with sponsors, therapists, and recovery groups, how do couples move forward when the porn addict is claiming he's starting to work an honest program? What are reasonable boundaries and expectations? Expectations again. How do I remain supportive when the pain and panic of distrust is overwhelming? Does the recovery faking change how he needs help? He has only generalized the situation to his sponsor, men's group, and/or CSAT.
I'm not sure I understand that last part about generalized.
I'm not either, but the rest of it's pretty straightforward. I mean,
yeah. So, man, this one's so hard because basically you have trauma around him working a program, and now he's coming back and saying, okay, but this time I'm being honest about it. What's reasonable for you not to believe it? Like, and if it's like, well, that's not fair. Well, meaning he's suggesting, well, that's not fair because this time it is honest. Okay, well, then he needs to work on having empathy that, I've said this many times and haven't followed through. And so I don't expect you to believe. So what's reasonable? Well, I would hope that if he's working an honest program, he says, you know what? Take as long as you need to believe me. I'm just going to keep working my honest program. Right? Like, and hopefully this time we can rebuild the trust and you can see that. At the same time, if he's telling you he's working an honest program, then all he's doing is actually traumatizing you more using recovery language. So, no, I don't blame you for a moment for not trusting, but that doesn't mean you're not supportive, right? The fact that you're still in the relationship trying to figure out how to be supportive is supportive. The panic of distrust is overwhelming. Yeah, I would say work on like learning to regulate and help finding others to help you regulate that panic. That's going to come up. Check it in, talk with others about it. I don't know how much, if he is showing you continually that he can't support you in that panic, then don't go to him with the panic. You use the judgment of recovery faking. Does that change how he needs help? I mean, how about this? If he's been recovery faking the whole time, it doesn't change how he needs help. It doesn't mean that clinicians or himself or his group members have actually figured it out, because ultimately he's got to be the one that figures out how he needs help. Therapists and group members, they're just doing their best to try and show up for somebody or to encourage the person to change, but he's the one that has to figure it out. I would ask the question, why does this feel different? Why does it feel different this time? And he's like, I don't know, I just feel it in my gut. Okay, explain it to me. How? What happened that at this time you feel that you're really changing? Right. I'm going to start to try and ask those questions, because if he doesn't have anything new for me, I might go, well, I don't, how long until he does this again?
Yeah.
Right. That's where I'm probably going to have to sit and go, well, how many times can I go through him claiming recovery, but not actually showing up and meeting my needs? Yeah, you're definitely in a tough spot. If you want to type the rest of that to help me understand the generalization of the situation, but I think overall that's me trying to cover it.
Yeah. One of the things, and again, this is Dr. Rob research, betrayed partners, actually, it's not Dr. Rob's, it's Steffens and Means. They found that betrayed partners, particularly betrayed partners of sex addicts, manifest symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And, when I read things like the panic of distrust,
Yeah.
boom, it's like, there it is. I mean, that is PTSD. You're terrified, whether you should be or not. And it is the loss of trust here that, again, is the most painful thing for betrayed partners generally. And here he is violating your trust over and over and over the course of 3 years. And now he says he's done recovery faking. And how are you supposed to trust him? I wouldn't. And
Yeah,
I usually get the other end of this is, when will she trust me? I'm like, well, when you stop acting out, when you get rigorously honest, when you tell the truth before she asks and tell the whole truth, and do that for like a year, she might start to trust you again.
well, and it's so hard. I always throw that on there. Like you throw out, do that for like a year. What you're really saying is do that for as long as you need to.
Do that for the rest of your life would be a good
Yeah.
idea. But
Right.
yeah,
Like
I mean, it's not gonna. There's no. You don't flip a switch and suddenly she
how
trust you again.
a part of it is, I'll say, well, how quickly can you empathize with her? How quickly can you start seeing things from her perspective and helping her feel that you finally see it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a piece you just said about betrayed partners, the
PTSD.
PTSD.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I would honestly say, if you are having panic responses, your main focus needs to be about regulating, like meaning, whether you're doing um, trauma therapy such as EMDR or ART, or I mean, there's lots of different ones out there. Some people tell me they really like brain spotting, stuff like that. But essentially finding some type of therapy that helps you regulate those panic responses. You can't rely on your partner to help you co-regulate, because they're not actually showing up for you in those moments. In fact, they're frustrated and confused at the fact that you don't trust them. So you actually need to be really working on skills for grounding. And so you go to your therapist and you say, hey, I need grounding skills. I need skills to regulate my emotions. And I need to learn how to find healthy people that can help me co-regulate, like that's what you're going to be focusing on, rather than focusing on his recovery.
Yeah. So we did get an explanation here of generalized. So admitting to relapse to supports, then retracting the admission months later, saying I was pressuring him, not being clear about acting out occurrences, calling things a lack of emotional control, continuing in the steps, etc. Yeah.
That just sounds like blaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's you aren't going to recover if you blame, right? Recovery only, an equal relationship only occurs with accountability, honesty, self-awareness and self-reflection, vulnerability around that. Like that doesn't sound like, again, that sounds like appeasing, admitting to relapse to support, and then retracting. That sounds like appeasement.
Yeah.
You're never going to get If they stay in those behaviors, you're never going to get equality in a relationship.
We got one more here. We got 1 minute left. So I'm going to read it and you can answer as much as you want. After 3 years of recovery and healing, my unfaithful my unfaithful husband still struggles with not going to the fix things state of mind, which we're guys. I can't share feelings with him without him going into shame, defensiveness, and trying to fix it. We've done counseling, therapy, etc. He says he really wants to be able to do this. He seems safe in a lot of other areas, but man, emotions seem like a language he can't speak, and it keeps us disconnected. Is there anything left to do? What a great question.
Oh, phenomenal question. It's hard because I have a hard time knowing exactly what you've done. I would probably spend a lot of time. It sucks for you because you're not getting the qualities of empathy, right? You're not getting the perspective taking. You're not getting the staying out of judgment, right? When somebody wants to fix, they're in a judgment about what the problem is and how to fix it. You're not getting him recognizing the emotion or communicating the emotion. So all of that are the 4 qualities of empathy, and you're not getting that. And so if you're stuck there, I would probably just stay in as much as possible. Hey, hun, talk to me about where you learned to fix it. Talk to me about your self-worth around fixing it. Like, is your self-worth determined on you somehow fixing the issue? And why is that? Where did that happen for you? What's that about? Who taught you that? Are you feeling the urge to fix it? Is that because you're scared? Are you feeling fear that if you don't fix it, I'm going to be angry or mad? Right? Like, you got to figure out what's going on in the area of his intensity of trying to fix it. And you got to stay in that place. It would be my judgment right now. It's such a crappy place to be for a partner, because it's like, all right, let's spend more time getting your needs met while I wait. Oh, it's exhausting, and it's lonely. So
thank you, Matt. I'm going to make you laugh here. There you go. I have no idea who that is. I truly have no. That's me after the beauty parlor. I don't know who that picture is.
Not Scott.
So, Matt, it's great to see you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm not sure what the December schedule is going to look like. I don't know if you've talked to Tammy about that.
I haven't, but we'll figure it out and
we'll work it out. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Oh no!
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Look at how many participants we have. I think everyone thinks it's starting right now.
The time change screwed us up. Yeah, everybody's showing up now.
Sorry, guys. Next time we do it, for the next 6 months, it's an hour earlier.
Unless you're in Arizona.
Unless you're in Arizona.
So yeah, I'll if you missed today's session, I'll post it online. It was a good one, so definitely worth tuning in for. It'll be on our YouTube channel later today. So thank you again, Matt. Always good to see you. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Bye.